The year was 1969. The air in America wasn't just thick with protest. It hummed with a desperate, fervent hope. Hope for peace. Hope for an end to the war in Vietnam that was tearing families apart, consuming young lives, and fracturing the very soul of the nation. It was a time of seismic shifts, of a generation finding its voice, and of a government grappling with a dissent it struggled to comprehend. Sarah was one of those voices, barely out of her teens, with a fire in her eyes and a stack of protest signs leaning against the wall of her dorm room. She believed in the power of people. She believed in the promise of America, that dissent was not just tolerated but essential, the very lifeblood of a healthy democracy. She had grown up hearing stories of civil rights marches, of ordinary citizens standing up to injustice, and she saw herself as part of that brand tradition. When the call came for the moratorium to end the war in Vietnam, she poured her heart into it. She organized, she marched, she spoke, her voice hoarse from chanting, her feet aching from miles on the pavement. Every rally felt like a surge of collective will, a powerful, undeniable tide that surely, inevitably, would turn the course of history. She saw the faces of thousands, united, chanting for peace, and felt an unshakable conviction that they were on the right side of history and that their government, ultimately, would listen. They had to. The sheer moral weight of their numbers, their conviction, their truth, felt overwhelming. But as the vibrant autumn leaves began to fall, a different kind of chill settled over the movement. It started subtly, like a faint, unsettling hum beneath the surface of their fervent activism. A phone line that seemed to click just a little too often, a metallic whisper interrupting conversations about strategy or upcoming demonstrations. Sarah would pause, her brow furrowing, then shake it off. Just a bad connection, she'd tell herself, or maybe the old dorm phone acting up again. But the clicks became more frequent, more distinct, a tiny, persistent intrusion on their private conversations. Then there was the car, a dark sedan that idled a bit too long down the street from their meeting house, its occupants obscured by tinted windows. Or the new face at a small closed-door strategy session, asking questions that felt just a touch too probing, too specific, questions that seemed designed to elicit information rather than contribute to the discussion. Sarah, like many, dismissed it. Paranoia, she told herself. The pressure was getting to everyone. They were fighting a war, after all, and the stakes were impossibly high. Their minds were playing tricks on them, a natural byproduct of the immense stress and the constant pushback from a society deeply divided. What Sarah and her fellow activists couldn't know was the chilling reality unfolding in the hushed, windowless corridors of power. Far from the sunlit streets of protest, on a crisp day in October 1969, a message landed on the desk of CIA Director Richard Helms. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order from Henry Kissinger himself, the National Security Advisor, a man known for his ruthless pragmatism and his unwavering loyalty to the president. Spy on the leaders of the groups requesting a moratorium on Vietnam. The directive was clear, unambiguous, and deeply disturbing. It was a direct command to turn the formidable machinery of American intelligence designed to counter foreign adversaries against its own citizens. This wasn't an isolated incident, a rogue operation born of a single moment of panic. It was a continuation of a dangerous precedent, a quiet but profound erosion of democratic principles. Since 1962, 3 successive presidents had ordered the Director of Central Intelligence to spy on Americans. The very agency created to gather foreign intelligence, to protect the nation from external threats, was now turning its formidable gaze inward. Its vast resources, its sophisticated tools of espionage, wiretaps that listened to every whispered plan, mail intercepts that opened private letters, infiltrators who befriended and betrayed, surveillance teams that shadowed every move, were deployed not against enemy agents or hostile foreign powers, but against college students, against professors, against community organizers, against anyone who dared to raise their voice in dissent. The lines between national security and political expediency had blurred, then vanished entirely. For Sarah, The subtle unease began to morph into something more concrete, more insidious, a creeping dread that settled deep in her bones. A friend, once a passionate orator, whose voice could stir a crowd to action, grew quiet, withdrawn, his usual fire replaced by a haunted look in his eyes. Another, who had been a tireless organizer, working day and night, suddenly dropped out, citing vague personal reasons, packing her bags and leaving town without a backward glance. The vibrant energy of their meetings, once crackling with open debate, with the spontaneous joy of collective action, became muted, guarded. The once boisterous discussions, filled with passionate arguments and revolutionary ideas, now felt like whispers in a crowded room. A new silence settled over their gatherings, not of contemplation, but of caution. Eyes would dart to the door, to the windows, to the faces of newcomers. Was that new volunteer truly committed, or were they reporting back to someone else? Every whispered plan, every passionate argument, every moment of vulnerability felt exposed, laid bare for unseen eyes. The idealism that had fueled Sarah, that had given her purpose and conviction, began to curdle into a bitter suspicion, a corrosive doubt. How could they fight for freedom abroad, for the liberation of a distant people, when their own freedoms were being quietly eroded at home by the very government they sought to influence? The conflict wasn't just in the streets, it was in their minds, a psychological war waged in the shadows. The constant, unseen pressure created a suffocating atmosphere, a pervasive sense of being watched, of being judged. Trust, the bedrock of any movement, the essential glue that binds people together in a common cause, began to fracture. Friend looked at friend, with a new, unsettling question in their eyes. Every new face was scrutinized, every casual remark weighed. The chilling effect was profound. Self-censorship crept in, bold ideas were reined back, passionate arguments were tempered, and the spontaneous joy of collective action was replaced by a gnawing sense of being hunted. Sarah felt it in her bones. The betrayal wasn't just political, it was personal. Her government, the one she believed in, the one whose founding principles she championed, was treating her, a citizen exercising her constitutional rights, as an enemy. She was not a foreign agent, not a spy, not a saboteur. She was an American, and she was being spied upon. Years later, long after the war had ended and the protests had faded, the truth began to trickle out. It came in drips and then in torrents. Investigations by congressional committees, courageous leaks from whistleblowers, and finally, the slow, reluctant declassification of documents. Slowly, painfully, the curtain was pulled back on programs like Project Mockingbird, which involved the CIA's covert influence over media, and Operation Chaos, the very program that had targeted Sarah and her peers. The suspicions that had haunted Sarah and countless others, dismissed as paranoia in the heat of the moment, were confirmed. The clicks on the phone lines, the strange cars, the new faces, they weren't imagined, they were real. The government had indeed waged a secret war against its own people, against the very act of peaceful dissent, against the constitutional right to speak truth to power. The resolution wasn't a triumphant victory, but a somber reckoning. The revelations left a lasting scar on the American psyche, a deep erosion of trust between the governed and the government. For Sarah, the bright idealism of her youth was tempered by a profound understanding of power and its abuses, of the fragility of freedom and the constant vigilance required to protect it. The fight for peace had been fought on two fronts, against a brutal war abroad and against a silent, insidious war on civil liberties at home. The story of 1969 isn't just about a war that ended. It's a stark reminder of the constant vigilance required to protect the very freedoms that define a nation, and the enduring question of who watches the watchers when the lights go out.